Welcome to the We Are One podcast. I'm Olivia, your host. Each week, I sit down with survivors from the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church to shine light on the abuse, the hypocrisy, and the truth that has existed behind closed doors. These stories matter. These voices matter. And together, we're breaking the silence. Before we begin, please note all individuals discussed in this podcast are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Trigger warning. This episode may include descriptions of abuse, trauma, and other sensitive topics. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
Ed, how are you?
Good. I'm really excited to continue speaking with you and, with this series that we are doing. And I know that, last episode we kind of, put a little trigger warning, spoiler, however you would like to, advisory, I don't know, about this conversation and how it can be very hard. And it's not good, it's not okay. It's good for children to understand, but age appropriately. So
Absolutely. Adults.
I know that you wanted to share some things before we started, so I will let you do that.
I do. So I think when I was writing and planning and talking back and forth with you, words are really important to me. And there have been a lot of quotes in this journey that have equally brought healing, equally brought moments of oomph, where you kind of a gut check. Brene Brown is absolutely one of my favorite speakers, authors, therapists, and she has a lot of those quotes for me. But for this episode in particular, it kind of started off the whole episode for me because she said that one day you will tell the story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. And I can tell you that has been my heart's cry. Even when I was younger, like I'd mentioned in the podcast before, that at the age of 12, I knew I wanted to do something in the lines of therapy, psychology. I have an absolute love for psychology. I'm just getting old. So we're probably leaning more towards coaching. But I want, if my story can rescue someone or help someone or encourage someone, it is worth not being silent anymore, which has kind of been the whole title for us, Silent No More. Definitely going to be book worthy. So yeah, that's kind of what triggered this, is the fact that this, at some point, I hope, is a catalyst for rescuing others and helping others heal.
Yeah, no, and I think that's amazing. And I think that, that quote goes along with my podcast vision. I'm here to expose what goes on in the IFB church and just, all the things that are swept under the rug, whether that's, money, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, which every single person, whether they like to admit it or not, has gone through spiritual abuse in the IFB.
Absolutely.
Because of the system.
Yeah.
And so, speaking with so many survivors around the world and just hearing so many things, even off camera, there's a lot of messages that I get and people are like not ready to publicly share, but there's just so many similarities. And there's so many, messages that end with like, thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'm like, it's not really me. It's like the survivors. Like, yeah, I have my opinions and stuff like that. And they're like, no, you're the one who created this. And so I'm like,
given the platform and the safe space.
yeah. And I'm just so thankful, like, for survivors like you and so many other, everyone who's been on and who's going to be on
Yes.
for future, seasons and season 3, that they have trusted me and my platform. And I'm glad that I can give you guys a safe platform, a safe space to be yourself.
Absolutely.
And to say what you need to say. And, at the end of the day, people, I feel like if you don't have haters in life, then you're not doing something good. So
that's probably very true. And equally, you need to know from those of us that are survivors in our own right and our own story, you provide the platform for speaking. You provide There is something about your personality, about your character that provides a safe space. You're not looking for your 5 minutes of fame, and you don't come across in a way that, like, okay, is your story big enough, dramatic enough to make me look good? It's more of a, you have a story to tell, and you have a story to tell, and now I'm going to make a space for all of us to share our stories. And that's why the title of your podcast, I think, is so critical, because it is a oneness that's being brought about. And, Christians are really down on the Me Too movement and the Church Too movement. And honestly, those things were created because we needed those movements, and we need a We Are One movement that says, you're not going to silence us, you're not going to gaslight us, you're not going to make us feel crazy. Because at the end of the day, like you're saying, those abuses, as you're getting survivor comments on the behind the scenes, I would almost guarantee you that those comments are starting to match up and make sense. Whereas your perpetrators, their stories tend to change. Their stories tend to whitewash. Their stories tend to gaslight. But the survivors and the victims, their stories match up. And so at the end of the day, the old adage is, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck. And so here's the thing: you have provided the platform for the truth to speak. And all of us are of one entity, trying to survive, trying to heal, trying to find others out there to validate us. And not necessarily us, but to validate what we've been through, and to validate that there is hope and there is healing. So, yeah, I think Brene Brown hit it. And I think you're one reason that that makes that very true.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you kind of like wanted to share that quote. I guess like to start off, what does that quote personally like mean to you to and like in today, like the Jennifer that you are today?
Oh, absolutely. I was gaslit from such an early age. And of course, in the 80s, we didn't know the terminology for that. And equally, being in the IFB, they so brainwash you that gaslighting's not on your radar. They so guilt trip you that to think anything about your story is not on your radar. I cannot tell you how I was told that I didn't need therapy. I didn't need a psychiatrist. What I needed was more church. I needed more Bible reading, more Bible memorization, more time in prayer, more joy. But I definitely didn't need more help. And so I basically was told, even if I was going to do any type of counseling, it needed to be Christian counseling. It needed to be done in private. And I did not need to share my story with anyone. Their reasoning behind that was so that I didn't discourage other believers, or so I didn't. Recently, I was told by a family member, well, be careful sharing your story because it will affect other members of the family. That's gaslighting 101. Now, they didn't say that to hurt me. They literally said that out of how they were raised and what was being told to them, because they have their own trauma story. And I wish that they could share that story, but that's what they've been told, is sharing will harm. And in reality, it's the silence that's harming. And it is so, again, it goes back to that silence is complicitness. And so I need that quote, for me, is my reminder that not speaking out is allowing harm to continue. But speaking out, even if it helps just one person, know, hey, me too. There's someone else out there going through this. There's someone else out there that was told their trauma wasn't trauma, that was told their sexual abuse wasn't sexual abuse, that was told their rape wasn't a rape. And so those are the kinds of quotes I cling to. And when I'm scared and when I'm hesitant to speak up, I know you and I spoke offline before about the fact, I'm like, well, what if people think that I'm exaggerating? Or what if I've been told so many times, well, that's your reality. But guess what? It is my reality and it is my story. And I can bring the receipts if needed. I don't want to, but I can. And
Yeah.
that is very real. And I'm finding out I am not alone in this. I may be 49, but I am surrounded. And instead of it getting better, like I hoped, it's gotten worse.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and I think that's, a good point that you kind of talked about, you're 49, but like we have similarities and I'm 25.
Yeah,
Um,
it's wild.
and I've talked to women who are in their 80s. I have talked to women and men who are in their 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. I mean, it does not matter. I've had people actually under of age DM me scared that they are going to be miserable at Bible college and what resources I can give to them. Like, and I'm like, I just wish that those who do like message me whatever like understand truly like I appreciate that so much. And again, um if anyone ever like is listening to this and I need resources, I would be so happy, and I know you two would, and I know all the other survivors too on like the my other seasons have said too. And so I just never want someone to live miserable because it's just life is so short and we only have one life here on earth. And I, I was 20 and like, and I've talked about why I've left my former church and how I got out of the IFB. But like at the end of the day, I just realized like I'm done living a double life. I watched Hannah Montana growing up and this was not the life. Like,
No, not at all. And equally, I want to remind very clearly as we go through my story, as we go through other stories, as you speak with others, trauma does not discriminate. It
no.
doesn't discriminate age, it doesn't discriminate gender, sexuality, race. It does not discriminate, but religion does, occultism does, um, perpetrators do. So
Yeah.
that's what.
So I guess now that because we're talking about, trauma and how it does not discriminate in like, I mean, I know people who listen to this and they know I'm right, and it's like, and it's
Mm,
brutal, but and they just like brush it off because it's easier to ignore and live in a black and white life.
it
So for
is.
you, Jennifer, what helped you first recognize like that you were enduring trauma? Like, was there just a one incident where you were like, okay, nope, this isn't, or was it a lot of things that just led up to like, holy crap, this is legit trauma?
Yeah, honestly, I was so what's the word I want to use? I want to make sure I use my words clearly, but I was so completely indoctrinated and kept in a bubble that I thought what was happening to me was either my fault, which I came to truly believe, or was a result of punishment from God because I wasn't good enough. Or equally, that's just how life was. I was just told that. And so, what made me realize that the events I had been through was trauma and that there was the potential that I had been raised in a cult, first of all, was people's facial expressions. I don't know. There are those of us who verbalize with sarcasm and humor and all the things. And then me too, the Me Too movement. And then there are those of us, also me, that our faces say everything, and it's like your friend to go fix your face. I cannot tell you how many times my partner has been like, Jed, fix your face. And I'm like, shit. Um, but that's how I knew it was trauma. I would overly share out of trauma, wanting people to be like, okay, here's my stuff. If you're going to stay around with my stuff, then maybe there's a chance we develop something relationally, whether it was romantic or friendship or just even being in churches. I wanted people to have my trauma. Um, but it wasn't until I began to do that in my 30s that people's faces needed to be fixed. They were like, oh my God, you went through what? You were told what? This happened to you? Like, do you realize you were in a cult? And I'm like, no, I was in a church. And they're like, have you seen the definition of a cult? Have you seen the definition or the power wheel in psychology that talks about control? And I'm like, no, I got this. And I started doing research, and turns out their reactions were the healthiest reactions I'd ever received. People were like, Jennifer, why are you in church? Or Jennifer, how could you believe in God? Or how are you still alive? And I'm thinking, oh, if you knew my story, I'm just really bad at committing suicide. Like, it's not good. Um, but seriously, that is what made me realize, because just starting therapy wasn't enough for me to admit that I had been through trauma. I was like, I'm here, but I probably shouldn't be because I'm whiny. I don't know how to take criticism, or this wasn't really rape, or it wasn't really sexual abuse, or my church really loved me. Um, and people were like, "No, girl, you need to get help. You need to study." And so that's what it was for me. It was people's reactions. And equally the trauma, the dam began to break. You can only push against something for so long before even the strongest fortress cracks. And it started to crack and it sprung a leak. And between that and people's reactions, it was like, something bigger is happening here. Maybe my gut instincts are right after all.
Yeah. No, and that's a really important thing to like bring up about facial expressions. I've had quite the reactions on here as video form of the
Uh,
podcast. If you watch it, like if someone says something that I was not expecting, I'm like, oh my gosh, and people are like, your face was priceless. Or there's been times where people are like, oh my god, you look so bored, or you look so mad, and it's like, oh my god, no, I promise you, like, I love that interview, I love, whatever. It's just like I'm bad with that. Like there's, oh gosh, I think at least once a day where I'm like, oh my god, I need to fix my face now. Like I've gotten really better about it, but in the like 2 years ago, I honestly think this podcast has really helped me with this. But like everyone would be like, so what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm fine, and they're like, no, you look mad. I'm like, no, I'm legit happy. And so that is a really good key point. And also, when I have trauma dumped to people, and people are like, what? And then it's like makes you realize, wait, that's not normal. Like, what do you mean you didn't have to wear a, like, what do you mean you didn't swallow a goldfish? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean you didn't live at church 6 or 7 days out of the week? What do you mean you didn't have to wear a denim skirt? What do you mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like things like
yeah,
that I have like stumbled upon where I'm like, oh god, that is not normal. And I think everyone probably has gone through that, definitely if they're out of it. And I think
yeah,
a lot of people also who are in it still that listen to podcasts like mine and others that
yeah,
know what we are saying is 100% true, relatable, whether that's feelings, events, same trauma, whatever. But
sure.
it's like, okay, no, I can't, whatever. And it's like, no, you know the truth.
Yes, yes.
And that's just another thing that I've gonna had to go through, like where I'm like, whatever, I can do as much as I can, and you do you. But I think that's really good to talk about how with the facial expressions, because it is true. Like, when definitely when you're trauma dumping in a way, and definitely to a new person, and you're ready to see how they're gonna react. Are they gonna leave? Are they going to laugh at you? Are they going to gaslight you? Kind of like how you said in the beginning when a family member said, okay, but like you're going to hurt, like whatever. And that
Absolutely.
is a gaslighting thing. And that's what the church also does too. It's like, well, if you say this, if you come out with this, it's going to hurt the church, or
Yes,
it's
you're
going to hurt the
going.
cause of Christ.
Yeah.
And so maybe like I just think, and there it is with the broom and the rug. You might like that's just like what it is.
Well, the ultimate gaslight was when I came forward with my sexual abuse. I was legitimately told, like, if you tell anybody about this, XYZ might happen. And then my own stepdad, I will never forget it, used to corner me for years after he had abused me. And he would say, you realize if you tell your mom that it's going to cause us to get divorced and you're going to break up the family, or you realize if you tell anybody, they won't believe you and you're going to look dumb, or, you shouldn't have worn that nightgown in front of me. So really, this is your fault. And so, but because that was normalized within the IFB of keeping it in-house, you go to the man, and then the man goes to the deacon, and then the deacon goes to the bigger deacon, and then the pastor, so forth. You continue in that cycle, and that is why so much is allowed. And equally too, I want to speak to your term of trauma dumping. I want to encourage everyone in this. I think this is really important to say. Trauma dumping is definitely a sign of trauma, But equally, I had my therapist bring so much relief for me, because I hated that about myself, that I would just bring out all my stuff when I would meet people like, hey, this happened and that happened. And I'm like, Jen, shut up. But she said to me, she said, honestly, within a therapist ideology and in a therapist world, they don't even term it trauma dumping because it is a side effect of trauma. It is no different than if you're taking a medication, or if you have a disease. Let's say you have a disease that causes you to lose your hair, or you have a disease that causes you to be deformed. Trauma causes that dumping. Trauma causes certain things. And so, a lot of people that are in the midst of trauma, me included, I felt very guilty of that, like I was doing something wrong. And in reality, it is part of what happens to you when you go through PTSD, what happens to you when you go through trauma. And so, I am so careful now. I'm like, I'm trauma throwing up or trauma dumping. And I'm like, no, wait, I'm showing trauma symptoms. Like this is symptomatic. I can't help it. I'm working on it. I'm aware of it, but I can't help it. And equally to those of us that want to help others, to just like you do on this podcast, be gracious when they're doing that. And that's something I was so impressed with you with, even in past listening to past podcasts, how you were able to hold their stories so lovingly.
Yeah.
So,
And to those who said I was, emotionally unintelligent or emotionally, that I'm 25, that just, it just proves like people who say that, like, oh, she can't handle this or whatever. It's like, if I can't handle it, I would have never done it from the first
absolutely,
go.
absolutely.
And I have worked so hard within myself and just to, and again, I think I truly believe that I was called to do this, and I'll do this until I no longer have
Nope.
anything to say or a new opportunity or journey comes my way. And I'm very pleased that so many survivors, again, like you and so many others, have found this platform safe and where you can feel safe trauma dumping. And
Yes.
whether we laugh about it,
Hmm.
we have cried. I have cried on this podcast. People have seen me ugly girl cry. Or I get angry and I get fired up, and then it like, puts like a step up my ass, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna do round two of exposing. But
Tables, as Moneymaker would say.
I'm like, let's go, and that's kind of like with this series, like,
Yes.
you know, Jennifer and I got to meet in person, and having that day just to like, physically meet and just
Mhm.
talk about things, hear things, whatever. I was like, all right, I need to go home. And I'm like working on this. And you have put so much work into it too, whether like, to help heal you and also for other people out there to realize that Jack Patterson is not a good person. He is
He's
not,
not. He's
he's
not.
not. And I know, like, again, we're going to deep more into it later on. But one thing I have noticed,
Hmm.
whether that's within me or just everyone else who's been on this podcast, the number one they like the I would say one of the top ones of signs that we all have this like same trauma, I guess I should say, is we always talk about obeying without question. Um, whether that's obeying your parents, you don't question anything, you don't question the man of God, aka the pastor, um,
Absolutely.
put him up to a like higher pedestal. You don't question the trustees or deacons in the church because, well, they were picked by pastor, and pastor's a good guy, so he would never put any, all of that, mindset, where if a parent is lying or an adult is lying, you can't even question it, like, to the
Not
point
the
where
adult is always right.
I often wonder how many people I know personally in the IFB that owned up to something that they did not do because they could not question authority
Absolutely.
because of the fear. It was
Yeah.
more easier just to say I did something versus questioning, no, I didn't, and why are you asking me that? And that just speaks volumes, um, of a cult. um,
Yeah.
and so I guess one of my things is like, what do you remember about the pressure to like conform the environments you were in and questioning, obeying, do this, do that. How did that look for you?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about that is the horrific Patch the Pirate songs. And if you ever get a chance to listen to those, they're
Yeah.
really cringy and disturbing. But I sang one to my partner the other night, and it was the obedience one.
Mhm.
Obedience is the very best way to show you believe. So again, they equate automatic obedience with your faith. Those two things, my obedience to my parents had nothing to do with my faith in God. But the way the IFB presents it is if you have faith in God, you are respectful and obedient to your parents, period. Who cares if they're bad parents? Who cares if they're abusive? Who cares if they treat you like a servant? Um, they're the parent, and equally, they put you in this conform, 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 which I was thinking about this today as I was prepping for tonight. How often in the IFB and in even in evangelical circles in general, we're told, do not conform to the world. Do not be like the world. Do not wear clothes like the world. Do not listen to music like the world. But wait, let's flip it and be like, do conform to the IFB, do wear your skirts, do wear your pantyhose, do this, do that, do, because the more you do this list, the more you look like an IFB member and not a worldly Christian. So the closer you are to Jesus. And I found that as I sat there today, I was like, oh my God, you're asking me this question about conformity, and I'm not supposed to conform on this side, but on this side, I have to conform in order to be a good Christian girl. So, and then equally, like we were saying, home was about conforming to obedience. Regardless of what was going on in that home, it was my job to conform and look like a certain perfect, obedient Christian girl in order to obtain a certain level, whether that was be in good standing with my parents or be in good standing in my school, which equally matched my church. And which is crazy. It became a situation for me because I was born an empath. God created me to be an empath. I have no doubt about that. He did not make a mistake on how much I feel and how much I love and how much I hurt. But I so desired validation. I so desired being seen. I so desired being wanted. And as a child, I needed that so desperately and wasn't getting it. So I was willing to conform at all cost, which meant denying who I was in my sexuality, like completely out of my mind to the point I became a really good actress, um denying who I was as a human, like with my empathy, because if you know anything about the IFB, they're not empathetic. Denying who I was with my love for other races, and equally denying and conforming my beliefs to their beliefs. I knew in my gut, which I was told could not be trusted and was sinful. I knew in my gut that what was being taught in my church and the actions of everyone around me, that it wasn't Jesus like. I knew in my gut, but yet I conformed and took on their beliefs so deeply just to be loved. And so, at that point, it was like the adult's always right, no matter what. So I was allowed to be made fun of. I was allowed to be shamed. I was stood up in front of the church. I was allowed to be bullied because I would be manipulated because of my empathy. I couldn't lie very well. So, guess what? I was the tattletale because I would rather be loved and seen and validated as a daughter and as a good Christian girl than to have friends. Because again, if I was more worried about friendships, what did the church say? The church said I was conforming. So conforming was bad until it fit into the mold of what they wanted to create me as.
hmm And I think that's really important to bring up in the way of like the conforming part, because you even conform into the perfect housewife, I think,
Absolutely.
and it makes you kind of be like you said, an actress in a way,
Mhm.
because you're like, oh, I can't show my emotions. I have to be this good godly wife.
I
I
had to be joyful at
have
all
to,
times.
yep, and I have to be submissive, and I can't say no to him, and I can't do that. And I know that you and I kind of briefly talked within the other episodes, here and there a little bit, about the time that you were your first marriage to the youth pastor,
Mhm.
and how abusive, even though he was a youth pastor, he was still
Yes.
very abusive.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, it was bad.
I want you to kind of talk about that, and just talk about your experience with it, because I feel like there are so many women and men out there that get into a relationship fresh out of Bible college because they think that they need to get their MRS degree, and most of these pastors have to be married to have a pastoral job. So they are quick, if there is a girl that shows any sign of interest, they are quick to woo, because that's what they
On
think.
it.
Uh, and so I want you to kind of talk about that.
Okay. Um, yeah. So what I would say to male or female, okay, I did exactly what you said. I was told, get your MRS degree. I was told, only get your MRS degree to someone that is going to serve God. Um, and then in the midst of it, as this process went on, and as I figured out that this person that I married was a narcissistic alcoholic abuser and a cheater and very good at it, because he was what you would call a covert narcissist, where he
Mm,
was very good at making friends around him and being this great guy out in public. And then he would leave grip marks and tightening marks on me where no one else could see them. And then he would verbally put me in my place so well, knowing my story, would verbally abuse me to the point that I truly believed that I wasn't worthy of anyone else, that I was lucky to have him, that I couldn't survive without him. His family came from money, and my family at that point had disowned me. And equally, I had churches backing him up, like, oh, well, you just need counseling or you just need this or that. And then there were years that it would calm down and quiet down because he could hide it, but I remember the pornography, like the disgusting levels of pornography I would find. And then equally being taught as Christian women and, well, no, as Christian women, sorry, I got to go with the patriarchy on this, but being taught that we give it up to them however they want it, whenever they want it at their demand. Um, this man would verbally abuse me, physically abuse me, and then maybe once every 6 months want me to give it up, but in a very violent and abusive way, to the point that it would leave me crying every time. But because we're not taught what good sex and healthy sex looks like, I allowed this man to rape me and abuse me. And I put it under the sign of, he's my husband, he's the head of the house. If I don't give it to him, he's going to go out and get it. But equally, if I wanted it, I wasn't pretty enough. I was too fat. I was this or that. And guess what? He was out getting it other places anyways, and then coming home. Um, so to be in that, and then to be, I don't want to say gaslit, because I feel like sometimes we use that term a lot and people don't know its definition. But these people so believed what they did, because at this point I was in the SBC, and even in some charismatic stuff. These people legitimately loved me, but they didn't know how to deal with these things. So when I brought it up, it was like, oh, well, maybe he'll get better if you stay. Maybe he'll get better if you take the lead. So now all of a sudden it was okay for me to be the spiritual leader, because they wanted him in the background so as not to cause any issues. And I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, but what about the marks underneath my shirt? Or what about the teenage girl that I saw him flirting with or putting hands on? And it got to a point where I began to believe that it was in my head, and I began to believe that there was no way out. And I started to get really depressed. And so for me, because at the time, even I still had these grandiose ideas that I could spiritually be rescued from depression and suicidal ideations. I became so perfectionistic that it took over my life. I would white glove my home for 6, 7 hours at a time. And I would scrub it with a toothbrush because my thought was, hey, as long as everything looked perfect on the outside, no one would know that I was in this horrifically abusive relationship and that I wasn't strong enough to get out. Um, I'm thankful that he left me. He left me at 30. He completely abandoned me, walked out, left me with the house to do all the things. I actually filed the divorce. I did everything. He left me with $60,000 in debt. Um, and I didn't know what to do. I'd never been on my own outside of having an authority figure over me in some form or fashion.
Yeah. And how would you say that, like, I guess, how did that like shape your identity and independence going through that?
Uh, so that actually, excuse me 1 second. Sorry, Olivia. I just hit the wrong button. Hope we can edit that out.
Oh yeah, we can.
Okay.
Did you see that my light fell like completely behind my laptop? So I'm like dragging on the side. I'm totally
There,
gonna edit that out.
yeah, I was trying to figure out how to mute these damn texts on my computer, but I don't know how. Anyways, okay, and go. So finding myself alone at 30, I had no clue what to do. So there were these emotions of fear, terror, if I'm honest, of, what had I done? I felt completely incapable of living in the real world. It's when I first noticed what imposter syndrome was, but equally, I didn't know to call it that or how to express it. Here I was shattered. I was battered. I was equally naive to the realities of the real world of what it meant to be single, what it meant to live on my own. But equally, there was this excitement of I'm free. I don't have to wake up and be told, hey, I'm going to kill you today. Or, hey, I want you to die. Or, hey, my gun's loaded, piss me off, and I'm going to shoot you. Yeah, I mean, we had fists through the walls. I had a gun held to my mouth. Um, and of course, he was like, oh, don't worry, it's not loaded. Well, I wasn't aware of that. And equally, that's pretty traumatic. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So at that point, there was an equal moment of holding two things. It was fear and excitement. Looking back now, though, I was strong. I had no knowledge of what it meant to move forward. And I had the shame of a divorce. And I remember people in the church saying, well, it wasn't that bad, you know, or, at least it wasn't XYZ, or at least he didn't leave bruises where you could see them. I had one person tell me that. Yeah. The other one that people love to throw at me in the church was, well, aren't you just so glad that you didn't have kids with them? I'm sorry, what? Like, what does that have to do with the
All
fact?
I can imagine is like this, and I probably am wrong. I can just imagine this elderly couple that just says whatever the hell they want to say and say that, and you're like, what? And
You would think, and yes,
it's probably someone young.
was my
And
mom. She was one of, but equally, it wasn't just her. So I want to be careful. It was people in the churches across the board. All of them were like, that was why you had infertility issues because God knew you shouldn't have a baby with this man because he would have hurt the kid or whatever. And I'm going, wait a minute. Last week you were trying to lay hands on me for me to get pregnant with this same person. So like, your methodology or your philosophies aren't mathing. It's not boy math versus girl math. It's boy mathing and it's not making sense. Like 2 and 2 is not making 4. I don't get it. You can't get 4.5 out of that. It doesn't
yeah.
work. So yeah, I knew that there was a life to be lived and experienced, but equally, I did not know even at 30, at that point, how much trauma I had been through or that those trauma cycles would continue.
And when you talk about the church members being that way,
Mhm.
including your mom and stuff, I guess my thing is I've spoken with a lot of survivors who have said, like, majority is the church has hurt me. The church people have hurt me. And a lot of them have walked away from, their faith and stuff. Like, rightfully so, because I can't imagine half of the things that people say. Because I know for a fact I probably would have grabbed that hymnal book and smacked them across the face, knowing me. So that's probably why they didn't do that. Um,
Right?
but how did that, I guess my thing is I know for a fact that my mom went through this. When you go through a divorce or separation in that way, and you just feel like you fall in that spiritual trap of like, I have to be here again
Uh-huh.
because, well, maybe God will bless me or God's putting me through another thing. And, I have to be here to hear this message. Maybe it's, meant for me. I know she went through that, and that thought of like, well, this is where I'm at now and I need this. Um, how did that spiritual pressure, impact your mental health?
It didn't do it a lot of good. I will say that. So there's a quote by Michelle, her name is Michelle Benedek, that I came across that kind of fits really well with this. And it says, if you put your validation in the hands of others, you will be obligated to go back every time you need it. And if that doesn't express church patterns, church abuse patterns, I don't know what does, but equally trauma victims. I wanted so desperately the validation of my church, of my spouses, of my family. And then after my divorce, I just wanted the validation of the fact that I could survive and that I was still loved. Like, here I was with this. I felt like I had that big scarlet letter on me going, "Oh, she's divorced, she's dirty, she's no longer good marriage material." As you know, in the IFB, they highly frown on divorce, or at least at the time they did. So for me to be in that situation was this big red mark on me. So, I was dealing with all of that, and it was interesting that they did just enough breadcrumbing of validation to keep me coming back. But I needed the church and I needed their strict demands and their beliefs because it gave me this ABC path of how to get through life and be close to God and equally have this community. And I needed that community at the time because I didn't know how to survive without it. I'd been raised in it.
Yeah.
Equally with my mom, she did her best with her trauma. I understand that. I want to be very clear about that. My mom has her own traumatic story. It is not mine to share. However, because I'm an empath, I tend to give more grace than maybe is healthy. And I'm realizing that. And while my mom has her own story, unfortunately, because she didn't deal with those things, her trauma bled into our world and she damaged me. And then allowing the IFB to control her. And literally, I have a letter from an old pastor there who basically said the families that came into our church gave us their kids to raise because they knew we could do a better job than them. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, you did a great job. You fucked us all up. Um, so basically, I buried myself in my belief system. I buried myself in the validation of my mom, of going, okay, when I am following this belief system, my mom is so proud of me and thinks I'm doing so well. So as long as I act this way, then I've got this. I've got the validation of church, the validation of mom, and the validation of others around me so I can survive. But that is not sustainable. Perfection is not sustainable. The anxiety that it brings is not sustainable. Hiding depression that it brings is not sustainable. And eventually, at some point, all that begins to leak and your mental health suffers. I didn't know this, but I had been suffering with some forms of depression probably my whole life. It ran in my mom's family, I later found out. But I just pushed it down and I faked it. I faked it with being extra bubbly. I faked it with being extra loud, extra funny, extra giving, and people pleasing so that you didn't see that part. But as early as 16 years old, I was having suicidal ideations. And then after my first husband left, I began to experience my first panic attacks, my first anxiety attacks. And if I'm honest about it, that need for a validation began to kill me, because I became very free with my trauma leakage, so to speak. And that began to take form in self destruction and self harm. So,
No, and I know a lot of survivors out there can totally understand that the spiritual of needing to be perfect and
mhm,
needing to, if I do all this, then I'll be good with God, I'll be good with my parents, I'll be good with this and that, and I'll like be so happy. And then you realize you're not happy. And then all they do is like either tell you that you're not saved and you don't have Jesus Christ in your heart, or you need to read your Bible better. And they don't, because again, they're not equipped for either. And then,
really not.
and they go on and, you just have to act. And that's where imposter syndrome, double life comes to play. And I know almost, I would say most of the people, at least from my former church, are like that. They live a double life.
Yes.
I babysit for most of them, and I know what they do. I know
Yeah.
what they do, and I laugh at Facebook, and I'm like, okay, and I've been there. I've done that. It's not a life to live. And I know you had spoken about also, within like your first marriage. Now, would you say that your church or your even mom and parents put that, like, I don't know, that stress on you having to find someone else? Or was it like you just were like, okay, I'm ready? Like, how did that come to play?
110. No, I can tell you that my mom, at that point I was completely out of church for a moment. I had gotten free from the IFB in my 30s. And I didn't really want anything to do with it, but also I missed the boundaries of it. So it was like, okay, I'm gonna play the game. I'm gonna go to church, but I'm not gonna be as strict into the IFB. So that's, where that Southern Baptist, my therapist describes it as, it was a way for me to begin to deconstruct without realizing I was doing it. And it was a safe way. If I had just ripped the band aid off and come out of religion completely, that could have been detrimental as well. But for me, what was interesting is I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome during that time. And I was constantly trying to figure out how to be a 30-year-old, but also how to experience my teen years and my college years and my young adult years that I felt like I had missed out on. And so I just was like, you know what? I'm going to try this whole living life thing and see what happens. This was the time of, I'm going to age myself, so don't laugh at me, but it's the time of MySpace when MySpace first came out. And, I had friends on there and whatnot. And this guy had reached out to me. I still very much was not open about the fact that I thought I was bisexual at the time. I knew something was different about me, but again, there were not the words because I had been in such a bubble. And equally, my fear of abandonment was greater than my need for being honest. And let's be honest, the IFB and places like Pensacola and whatnot create a space for you to fake that double life. Okay. So this guy and I met up at a Starbucks. First guy that I'd ever met that was openly bisexual. But there was something incredibly intriguing about him. We had coffee for 6 hours, and a year later, we got married. Um, this guy, I did not know it at the time because in my own brokenness, I thought red flags meant it was a carnival parade and there was going to be candy. Okay. Equally, I had this need this empath side of me saw the good in everyone, and I thought that I could fix him. This man loved me. I will say that. I do not doubt that Randy loved me. However, Randy had his own mental health issues. He was a narcissist. And he was really, really good at love bombing and gaslighting. And that is where I learned what gaslighting really was. There were so many red flags that I legit probably could have thrown Carnival on my own. But I had not found my voice yet. And I was so used to being gaslit and so used to being told I was crazy and so used to being told I was imagining things. I mean, from my rape to my sexual abuse, I mean, all of that. So at this point, I'm going, okay, maybe it's me that's broken. This guy tells me I'm beautiful, tells me he loves me. He had a strong, dominant personality, which I needed because I realized I had a strong personality and I needed someone that could override that. Here was this man. He equally was interested in God and church, but was open to visiting other places. So I'm like, ooh, maybe they'll like him. Um, this man, I loved his family. His family loved me. Probably the biggest red flag for me that I should have picked up and ran was when, before his mom passed, she was like, "We are so happy that he has you. He has never been this happy. He has never been this healthy. He has never stayed with a girl this long." And I'm like, but at the time in my brokenness, I took that as, oh, look, Jen, this is the perfect match. This is your soulmate. You've met your one true love. Um, and everything was good until it wasn't. And 1 week and 1 year after, or 1 year, 1 week after our 1 year anniversary, that's how you say that. Um, he went on a trip to the town he was from, and I was supposed to go with him, and he talked me out of it at the last minute. I thought nothing of it. It was for a funeral of a close family member. So there was, obviously I was trying to be empathetic. Turns out during that time, he had been talking to an ex. And instead of telling me, I got the phone shut off. I couldn't get a hold of him. And I got a phone call that was like, hey, he's not coming back. Are you sitting down? Like, he's gone. And I just remember my whole, like, I couldn't breathe. And through that experience, it got really ugly. When he came back to get his stuff, I literally stood and begged him not to leave. Like, that's how desperate I was. I was on the ground in the parking lot begging him not to leave. And I was like, why did you marry me if you were going to do this to me? And he literally said to me, I'll never forget it. He was like, because you would eat dog shit off the floor for me if I asked you to. And what was so triggering for me in that, he wasn't wrong. But what was so triggering is the first guy that I was married to, the youth pastor, was like, I married you because you did whatever I said and you took care of me better than my mom and I didn't have to do anything. So here's this pattern that I'm seeing, that I'm being used for what I can provide. I'm not loved, but I'm being used for what I can give. And if you think about that, that ties in to the church. It was, okay, what can you give us as a Christian? But the minute you stop following these rules, we're done with you. Or even with, unfortunately, my mom, as long as you follow this set of rules, it's great, but not because I love Jesus more than I love you. I'm done with you. So it destroyed me. About a week later, I was staying with my brother and I had a handful of pills and I was done. I was like, I do not want to live. I'm not worthy of living. Everybody would be better off without me. I want to say very clearly in this moment that anyone that says that suicide is the easy way out, is the coward's way out, has never had suicidal ideations. Because those of us that genuinely deal with that, we truly believe in the very core of our hearts that the world is better off without us, that we are doing you a favor, that we are making your lives easier, that we're making your lives better. It has nothing to do, for the majority of suicidal ideations, it has nothing to do with wanting to take the easy way out. It's more like you're better off without me. Let me get rid of myself so that you're okay. I was moments from swallowing the pills, and I'll never forget it. But a note came under the door of the bedroom I was in, and my 4-year-old niece had written me this cute little drawing, and it stopped me. And I remember going downstairs, and she sat and cried with me. And she's like, "Did Uncle Randy hurt you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she cried. This little 4-year-old girl cried with me. And in that moment, that gave me enough reason to live. I didn't know how. And unfortunately, I didn't do it well. While I didn't commit suicide, I became very self-harming and self-punishing to the point that I was very high risk. I would do high risk things. I chased the high of danger. And yeah, that started a path forward for the next few years that trauma will do. So,
Well, thank you for, sharing that. I know that's not easy, but I think that a lot of women and men out there in that constant battle of manipulation and emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, um, can, appreciate your vulnerability and just talking about it and just wanting to share that.
uh,
I know we have talked a lot about healing and what that's looking like for you. And I know that you have specifically told me that you do EMDR therapy. And I know briefly I've talked with other survivors on here about it, whether that's they've done it, they want to do it. How is that playing in your healing?
it's been a critical factor, I'll be honest. It has allowed me to revisit these traumas, but take out the high emotions so that I can process. So EMDR has to do with eye movements and rapid desensitization. And the idea is either through following like a pen or a sound or a clicker. And then for me, what I did was I held electrical devices that gave like a little tens unit buzz. So I could focus on that going through my body while equally watching my therapist with like a pendulum. And it allowed me to revisit traumas like my sexual abuse, being blamed for it, the abandonment, um, the ex that we were just talking about committed suicide. So I had to process all of this stuff. But to talk about it would bring on severe panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I couldn't function. I would just basically hole up. And doing EMDR therapy in my early 30s is when I started it, was a game changer. Like I can talk about some of these things today in a healthy way and in a calm way because of EMDR. It just takes out that high emotion and that anxiety and that panic that can come with bringing back painful memories. It works for all kinds. I highly recommend it. What's interesting is a lot of Christians are against it. A lot of Christians think that, it's of the devil or whatever. And I'm sorry, God created doctors, God created psychology, God gave them the brains to figure this out in order that we could evolve, in order that we could help each other. And it has been critical in keeping me alive. It's really interesting that, you know, therapy was so banned, and now I know why. Us going to therapy or seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist had nothing to do with whether it was right or wrong. It had everything to do with the church's fear of their indoctrination being called out. And it had everything to do with giving me as a woman a voice and an ability to trust my gut and listen to my gut and begin to ask the questions they didn't want asked. And EMDR has allowed me to do that. So,
Yeah, and I know it's made you a better woman and a better mom. I know that you became pregnant at 37 um, and giving birth to your baby boy, and I know that you have said that you're also doing this for him in the way of like healing yourself so
yeah,
that
absolutely.
you have the best a healthy version of you as his mom. So I know, like, you have talked about bettering yourself as for your son. And I know that, again, you're doing this also for him in a way.
Yeah.
Um, so talk about that. How was it realizing that you became pregnant at, that age, and where you're at now?
Okay. So Jackson just turned 13 this week, on Monday. I cannot believe I have a 13-year-old, a teenager in the house. And I got to tell you, he's my buddy. And being raised in an independent church, they taught that teenagers were this horrible thing and you definitely weren't supposed to be friends with your kids. And I am learning that that too was wrong because, again, they were trying to disengage those relationships so that you didn't figure things out. Um, but equally, I tried for probably 15 years to get pregnant. I struggled with fertility issues. I was never taken to the doctor as a teenager when I should have been, because I wasn't of marrying age yet. So, of course, we weren't going to deal with any sexual issues, right? But equally, growing up in the fundy world, you were taught that the Proverbs 30 woman ideology, and she had a quiver full of kids, and you were a stay-at-home mom and you were a stay-at-home wife, or equally you were on the mission field. So the fact that I couldn't bear children and was told I would never get pregnant, I wasn't ovulating. I had tried fertility treatments, I wasn't ovulating. The fact that I couldn't get pregnant, I think, made that desire even stronger because I equated motherhood with being a strong Christian woman. And so the fact that I'd already been through all this other stuff and I couldn't bear a child when everyone around me, including all my siblings, were having kids, um, there was something wrong with me as a woman, as a Christian, and spiritually. I was like, either I'm being punished or I'm just less than. So if I'm honest, as a teenager, and even in college and once I was married, I was like, I don't know that I really want kids. Um, but that was such a taboo thing to say because I wasn't doing the whole reason that sex was created in the Bible was for procreation, not enjoyment, just procreation. And here I was saying I didn't want to do that. I learned very quickly not to bring that up. And so I put the pressure on myself, and the shame and the guilt that I felt and the embarrassment that I couldn't have kids, the depression that I went through because of it. And so I had moved to Nashville, and I had a friend and I got pregnant. And that friend just so happened to be African American. Um, and let me just tell you, you want to talk about shaking the walls of the fundy world. I just did. I grew up in a very racist church. I grew up in a church that allowed Peter Ruckman to come in and speak, who is well known racist and well known involved in the KKK and other things. Um, I remember being told by family if I ever was with anyone other than a white person, they would disown me. So, I knew. I remember calling my mom and equally knowing that she was going to be ashamed of me at 37 for having a child out of wedlock, much less a black child. And so I was like, Mom, God did a miracle. I'm pregnant. Like, I didn't ovulate until that moment. And I was like, this baby, there's got to be a reason for it. I was like, it could kill me. And I don't know if I should have it, but there's got to be a reason. And first words were, I need time to process. And is the baby black? Not, I'm so happy for you. Not, I know that you've wanted this. Not even concerned for my health of, hey, should you have the baby?
Yeah.
Because heaven forbid we have women's rights. But those were the questions. It only took her a couple days, and I will give her credit. Up until recently, Jackson and her were best of friends. Like unfortunately, Jackson has seen the fallout of all of this, and it has crushed his heart, because he doesn't understand all of it or any of it, nor should he. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Uh, I then got a call from Jack Patterson, who had been married to my mom, right? had been married to my mom for a couple of years. I was not a fan, but he was really good at schmoozing me until that phone call. He let me know that Jackson was going to be cursed because he was of the line of Ham, Shem, and Japheth in the Bible. I had no clue what any of that meant at the time because they were very careful how they worded it in the church. But basically, because my child was African American, he was going to be cursed. And I better not let him become, over the years, it's been don't let him do his hair like this or don't let him wear those clothes because he's going to be ghetto or he's going to be gangster. He said things to him like, have you met a soul sister yet? Or what's up, bro? Yeah, you cannot do that. I don't care if you're from Detroit. You don't have that right.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
so that put a really bad taste. And I will say my mom took up for me in that. She was really pissed at him, but that's the narrative there is he gets away with murder and it hurts her, but yet out in public because she is taught to honor the man of God, she takes up for him. But again, you're allowing abuses as racism, and I'm understanding now that that's not okay.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did go ahead and have Jackson. It was a very long and a very sick pregnancy. But he is the best thing that ever happened to me. And he is the reason that I stayed alive. He has given me hope. He is the reason, honestly, that I was willing to embrace who I was. He's the reason I got out of a third marriage, a very unhealthy one. He is the reason that I don't want to be silent anymore because generational trauma has to stop somewhere, and it is going to stop with me, um, at least in my family. Generational trauma, Jackson doubting who he is or questioning his sexuality, I'm going to love that child no matter what. I support him 100% as my child. But I want him to see a mom that fights for justice. That if I say I love Jesus, then I am going to walk in a way that Jesus walked. And that's giving, and that's loving the oppressed, loving the outcast, loving the immigrant, loving the refugee. That is opening my home. That is fighting Christian nationalism and everything that goes with it. Um, he he's the next generation, and if I don't stop it, and if I don't speak up, who will? It's going to continue to harm and just continue to go down the pike, and it's not going to.
Yeah, no, and I think that's amazing that you are willing to let your son be who he is, and let him figure out what, who makes Jackson, right? It's
Mm,
weird saying that because my boyfriend's name is Jackson, so it's like,
I like that.
but, and I love that too, because, I, I agree in the way of like, I have said this with my boyfriend and, conversations because I do want to know, like, if our child were to ever, come out or whatever, do I know that you will be a safe person? Like
Absolutely.
I will be. And I'm glad that we agreed on it.
Good.
Um I don't think he listens. I don't know. He used to listen to the podcast when we first met, and I remember him like talking about it, and I was like, oh God, he's probably gonna run away and then like go. So if you see this, but yeah, no, I'm so glad though that even though surrounding like with the racism within your pregnancy and just also probably his life too, knowing like that people that or you're related to had those feelings and said those things like what Jack Patterson said, or just like, don't wear your hair that way or don't wear that because it's so wrong. But I'm so glad that like he has a mom like you who's like, no, if you want to, you can, because that doesn't define ghetto ness. That doesn't define that. And those terms are not okay. And I'm so glad like that you also advocated for him. Probably definitely when he was probably younger, when he didn't have a voice as much, and as he grows up, like I hope he realizes like that he has a voice too. And I'm glad that you can show him that by doing this, that you're no longer going to be silent and you are going to help with the generation trauma, and you're going to say, ends with me, it ends with us. We're not, you are not going to pass on that. And I'm so happy to know that you are doing that and you're putting in the work to better yourself. I wish
So
I often wonder like how many parents truly, if they were willing to like put themselves in therapy, how many future generations would be saved from it. But I just also think that it, you have to do it yourself. Uh,
you did.
and I know that so many people and so many things happen and it changes who you are as a person. It changes your outlook on things. Uh, and I know that something very traumatic happened to you. Uh,
What, that wasn't enough?
oh, Jennifer, your story gets even more
Ah,
crazy.
it
Uh,
does. Almost embarrassing.
it's not even embarrassing because I honestly feel like everything you went through is it led you here. And that's how I have to look at things too. I'm so glad that things did not go my way. I'm so
Absolutely.
thankful. I'm so thankful that God put me in certain situations, even though at the time I did not understand them, whether I was a child, I was a teenager confused, or it is still an adult where I'm like, okay, God, why am I here? Like, like I feel like I'm in like a lost hallway.
Yeah.
I'm thankful though once I go over, I'm like, oh, that's why.
Mhm.
That's why. And I know that I don't know, your story gets more deeper, and I'm trying to figure out how to like wrap this into a question, and I'm making it more awkward. You went through a severe traumatic car wreck. And
Mhm.
I remember the first time we talked on the phone, and you were telling me that I was driving my car, and I thought, oh God, oh no. I was like driving to get gas. I'm like, can I get to the gas station? Pull over.
Hard.
And I was just like, oh my gosh. What do you remember about that?
Okay. So yeah, I decided to get in a fight with a semi truck and I lost. Turns out they are bigger than me. The very short bullet point of that is I had visited my mom in Detroit in February. It was the day before Jackson was to turn 3 months, and we had spent time there. I was coming back to Cincinnati. It was snowing, which I'm totally fine with. Winter was my favorite season. That's a key word there was. I was actually a really good driver in snow. Turns out people in Detroit are bananas in snow. Short version is I called my mom and said, hey, it's snowing. Can you check the weather? I'm trying to decide if I need to come back to your place or keep going. And about that time I was on the phone with her. I looked in front of me and a car hauler lost a couple of cars and a jackknifed. And then I look behind me and I remember at that point saying, Mom, we're gonna get hit. So she's on the phone with me. And Jackson and I were slammed into at least twice. I don't remember a whole lot of details. At that point, you have to remember I'm a new mom of a baby I wasn't supposed to have. 4 days into Jackson's birth, I had found out he was starving. He wasn't getting enough milk. So I'd gone through that trauma. So here I am trying as a new mom, all the hormones that come with it. We're stopped. And I swear to God, I look next to me and there's a fuel tanker. And I said to my mom on the phone, I said, Mom, Jackson is screaming. I can't get to him. And there's a fuel tanker next to us. And if it gets hit, it's going to blow. And so I stepped out of my car. Now, mind you, I'm on the interstate. I get out of my car, and I swear to you, there were no cars behind us. There was no traffic coming. It was as if everything had stopped. And I said to my mom, there's no vehicles. I'm going to get him and get to the side of the road away from the car, the fuel tanker. So I go around, and all I remember in that moment is seeing a bright white light. Now, my mom has a different version because she wasn't in it. And she said that I started screaming, Mom, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to get hit. So I had opened Jackson's door to get him out. And I guess in the moment of knowing that something was coming, I went to lay over top of him to protect him and equally to try to crawl into the back seat to kind of hunker down. So I was hit in my left side and it ripped the back door to the front and it threw me across 2 lanes of interstate over the top of my car. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I remember looking up and it was like out of watching, if you've ever seen Final Destination, where the guy knows that the car, like it's coming for him. I watched this car come for my head. And all I remember thinking was, this is it. I wasn't afraid. Your life literally flashes before you, but all I could think about was, I don't know where my Jackson is. And my last prayer was, God, don't let me feel this and don't let my baby die. Um, and a cop car out of nowhere blocked this other car, and I watched it move towards me in slow motion, and it stopped right before it hit me. Now at the time, because of the impact, I was bleeding to death. I was anemic from the pregnancy and didn't know it, but it ripped me open, all the way down to my hip bone. So I was actually, the way I landed on top of ice with it open. So that's what saved my life. Miracle number one. Um, I did not hit my head, even though I passed out, and I was like, what do you call it? Paralyzed from the waist down from the trauma. But my car had gotten hit again with that door open. So I tried army crawling to him and I couldn't make it because I had broken and crushed and all the things. And so, long story short, I was in the hospital for 30 days. I was in surgery for 7 hours with a blood transfusion. I've had 20 plus surgeries since then. I was in a wheelchair. I had to learn how to walk again. Because of it, I deal with what they call trauma arthritis and fibromyalgia. So there are days I can move, there are days I absolutely cannot. Um, what I later found out while I was in the hospital, I had this amazing dream about these big angel wings that literally picked me up and laid me on the ground. Because if I had landed any other way, I would not have lived. If I had been any other size, they say that the vehicle that hit me would have crushed me or split me in half. What I found out in the middle of the investigation was probably one of the most amazing things. You can say it's God, you can say it was angels, you can say it was my grandpa in heaven. I don't know. But there was never a fuel tanker next to me. If you look at the video footage from the helicopter, the fuel tanker is what hit me. It was an AmeriGas fuel tanker. And he was texting and had bad brakes and had not paid attention that there was stop traffic and a wreck ahead. What started out as a 5-car pileup, he ended up causing a 30-something car pileup. Mine was the most traumatic injuries because I was physically hit by a semi truck. He actually owned up to it when he got out of his vehicle, although I don't remember. And I had a dream a few weeks later and realized, because you would not believe the number of men that gave me grief about getting out of the car. Not women. All the moms are like, protect your baby. The men are like, you're so dumb, you're so stupid. Um, what I later realized after this fuel tanker kind of gave his testimony and stuff is, if I had stayed in my car, he would have never looked up and never slowed down. And that fuel tanker would have rammed into the end of our car and it would have exploded and killed not only my son and I, but God knows how many. Me getting out of my vehicle caused him to slow down. Me getting out of my vehicle saved my son's life and saved that tanker from blowing up. So yeah, I went through that on top of everything else, and I deal with that daily. I'm waiting on some knee surgeries and some hip surgeries. And,
Yeah.
party. I mean, if you can't get run over and survive it. So snow is not my favorite. I laid in the snow. It took the ambulance over 45 minutes to get there. My mom heard it. My mom never left my side. And Jack Patterson gave her shit for that. But my mom never left the hospital. And she was there for a lot of my surgeries at the beginning, until she wasn't. But yeah. So
I will say, I know that you said that Jack Patterson gave your mom crap about being there and staying with you in the hospital. Can you give some examples?
off down. Yeah. He would call her and tell her she needed to come home for a while to let random strangers come stay with me, like people from their church or something. And my mom's like, I'm not leaving her. or if I think he came up there like twice, and he would be so busy BSing the nurses and trying to get them to like him and telling his stories about being from Detroit and all that shit. Um, he would basically, what it came down to, if I'm really honest, is me having the wreck took the attention off of him. She wasn't home to wait on him hand and foot. Instead, she was there with me, and that would make him angry. So I would hear him on the phone giving her grief, guilt tripping her, telling her she needed to come home, telling her to let someone else come stay with me. Like, he was willing to put a random stranger in there with me. Um, but my mom didn't want to leave, as any mom wouldn't want to leave. I had some severe complications and had to have emergency surgery, different things like that. So, dealing with that, I had to sneak Jackson in. I didn't get to see him for 3 months. I had to quit, or not 3 months, I'm sorry, for 30 days. I had to quit nursing the day of the wreck. Yeah, so.
And since you mentioned that Jack Patterson was so quick to put a random church member, I have to ask, um, how did the church handle the news of your wreck? Did they show you compassion? Were they?
So there were two people in my mom's church that I did not know that showed me some really amazing love. They are no longer in that church, go figure. A couple of them are not even in church, thankfully. Um, but what's sad is other people that I thought would show up for her didn't. And whether that's of her own doing or their doing, I don't want to speak to that. But I had just visited a church in Cincinnati a couple of times. Um, and the pastor there, I had met them. I had started getting involved in a little small group. Maybe I'd gone once or something. I don't even know. And it was a non denominational. It was my first time in a non denominational. And it was really neat because when I had the wreck, I did not have a job, and I did not have insurance. And so, as you can imagine, what that would do after spending 30 days in a hospital, all the medical equipment, I had multiple surgeries. This church showed up with enough food to provide for not only my son and I, but for my mom and my sister in law's family of 6 at the time, 7 at the time. Fed us for months. And there were people in the church that stepped up and paid. Jackson had no need of diapers or clothes or toys those first several months. Like, these people didn't know me, and they showed up and they visited. And honestly, I'm still friends with a lot of them on social media now, which is amazing. And I ended up with a best friend out of it. She and I have been friends for 12 years now, and she is Jackson's chosen aunt. And she and I are ride or dies. Like, this girl has been there through everything. And it was because of that church that I met her. I mean, these people went as far on my birthday to go rent a ramp to take me up the steps on the porch because they didn't want to lift my wheelchair. So they ramped me up and down it, came and picked me up for appointments, took me to get my nails done, like all kinds of craziness. And I'm like, I didn't know there were people out there like that. Because if I'm honest, when I went through having to stay in the psych ward and whatnot, after my suicide attempt and all of those things, people just bailed. Like, I lost everyone. And yet here were these random strangers showing me. And so even in my deconstruction process, I've been like, okay, if I choose to follow Jesus, that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah. I would say, with having a church family do that for you, um, how did that, how did that help you to continue with your faith while you're still deconstructing? But I know that you are a Christ follower, and that you do go to a church now where they're so welcoming and loving to all.
Yeah.
And I know it was very important, and it should be important for everyone to feel that way. How did that, though, experiencing that versus like with the IFB and like with Jack Patterson, and having that negativity and all of that versus this, how did that help you, though, remain your faith?
Yeah. It was one of two things that I would say has allowed me to still believe in God. The other was when I was in Nashville, Brentwood Baptist. They are actually the ones that paid for 6 months of EMDR for me. I was not a member. I had visited after, so I spent 10 days in a hospital for um, cutting myself at work and trying to kill myself and being in psychosis and whatnot. And this church lovingly supported me and found me a real therapist with real degrees in EMDR training, and that was an experience of Jesus. I'm like, you don't know me anything, and they're like, we want to help you.
Yeah.
Uh, so then having this happen just a year later, it was like God was showing me that maybe my gut instinct was right, that maybe there was a difference between religion and being a Jesus follower. Um, Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't realize my deconstruction had begun, and I was told that the wreck happened to slow me down and cause me to be a better mom and be less promiscuous, and that the wreck happened basically as God's way of keeping me under control. So, again, it was my fault. So, unfortunately, I doubled down on church and high control religion is what we'll call it now because it was kind of a hodgepodge of denomination. Um,
Yeah.
but I went back into high control religion, which leads to me choosing to get married again by someone a church picked for me because at this point I was so ashamed and at the point of I literally would make a joke out of it, but I would tell people, well, my picker's broken. I was told that being a woman in my 40s, I'm sorry, my late 30s at that point, I was 37, 38. Being a woman in my late 30s, being overweight, being physically broken after the wreck, and let's not forget, being the single mother to a Black son, that I would need a strong man in my life to provide for me. And even if it wasn't love at first sight, that it was better for me to be married because I didn't really want to do it on my own. So again, I was being told what I wanted, how to think, how to feel, and equally gaslit to believe I couldn't do it on my own. Um, but I say all that to say that will lead into episode 4. But equally, I can also say that because of Brentwood Baptist and Eastside Christian, um, it allowed me to know that I do believe in God. Um, I do believe in faith and I do believe in the Jesus of the New Testament and living like he does. And yes, again, probably later on in episode 4, I do go to an amazing church that not only accepts my partner and I, but loves us and allows us to serve. And we serve in ways that reach the community. And I've never been in a place that I have had chosen family that love me unconditionally, genuinely, and are the hands and feet of Jesus. And they are making moves in the city of Louisville to reach the immigrants, to fight against injustices, to fight ICE, to fight poverty, to fight and make sure that people have food and whatever they need. And the way they have wrapped their arms around my son and around my partner's kids has been absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I know that we need more of that. Um, and there's just so many things that are happening in the world, and it's a dark place, and it's a very scary place. But I also think that there's more good people out there than bad.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and to wrap this episode up without giving more details for episode 4, looking back at like your entire journey, what do
Mhm.
you wish people would understand about recovery from religious trauma, abuse, and lifelong conditioning?
Um, I'll say this, it's not easy. Deconstruction is not me looking for a way to sin. It is not looking for me for a way to live the good life or to rebel. Deconstruction is me finding my voice and fighting because I love Jesus. It is me fighting for truth because I love people. And I guess if I had anything to wrap it up and say is ask the questions, listen to your gut. If something doesn't sound right, do your own research. You're allowed to question when something doesn't feel right.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
Bible,
God gives us a brain. God
God
gives us.
created us with a brain. God created us with emotions. God created us. He says in the New Testament that when he left, he would send the Holy Spirit, right? I am fully convinced at this point that that has shown up for us now in our guts. That is your gut instinct. That is when you walk into a room of really bad people, you start to feel the ick. That's the Holy Spirit. You can call it your gut instinct. You can call it the Holy Spirit. You can call it voodoo. I don't care. But we were created with that. And people need to know that you are good. You were created good. God says his creation was good. We make bad choices sometimes, but his creation is good, which means you're okay. Trust your gut. And if something doesn't feel right and you want to get out and take a break, do it. If you want to study the Bible on your own or study the Greek or the Hebrew or study it in some different language, do it. If you want to study other religions and find out, guess what? A lot of this high control religion stuff is all based on the same styles of religion. It's not Jesus, it's religion. And what's happening is the church is creating religious robots instead of creating genuine people that love Jesus, and that's not the people's fault. They're being indoctrinated. So I would say trust your gut, ask the questions, and don't be afraid. Take that brave step because it's eye-opening. Once your eyes are opened, you can't go back. But you can still love God, you can still love others, you can still love Jesus and hold to a form of faith, but it doesn't have to look like what you've been told.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great way to end today's episode. And I know in part four, we are going to deep dive into where Jennifer is at now, more to who Jennifer is. So I'm really excited to do that with you and
Thank you.
for next week's episode. So yeah, stay tuned for next week's episode. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day.
Have a great night.